Imagine claiming you have a literal divine superpower that lets you see exactly what your followers are doing miles away, like in real time.
Right, just total supernatural surveillance.
Exactly. But then imagine taking that exact same, divine authority and using it to just ruthlessly undercut your rivals in a cutthroat real estate bidding war.
It is a pretty wild pivot, going from mystic to real estate mogul.
It really is. So welcome to the deep dive. Today we are exploring what happens when supernatural visions basically collide head-on with heavy bureaucracy. We're looking at the intense and, frankly, very contradictory life of Don Bosco.
Yeah, the 19th century religious founder of the Salesian Society. And, it completely shatters the classical painting we usually have in our heads of historical visionary.
Oh, totally.
We tend to expect these figures to be purely ethereal, right? Just floating above it all, untethered from the mundane world. But the reality of building a massive organization from the ground up, it requires navigating some incredibly gritty earthly problems.
Which brings us to the mission for you listening today. We are looking at a very specific, curated stack of primary source documents. We've got historical notes, correspondence, and they all detail events that took place in July across several different years.
Right, ranging from 1860 to 1882.
Yeah, exactly. And by sticking strictly to the facts in these logs, we are going to uncover the actual mechanics of how a leader balances having literal supernatural visions with the mundane headaches of real estate negotiations and bitter legal disputes. We are looking at the administration of theology.
And looking at that operational side of a religious movement, it reveals a level of complexity that theological texts alone just don't capture. You're seeing a manager dealing with rebellious teenagers, navigating deeply painful illnesses, and negotiating with stubborn nuns.
Not to mention swallowing unjust legal settlements to protect his life's work.
Exactly. It's fascinating.
So let's jump straight into the deep end here, and I mean that literally. The date is July 21, 1862. This is a really crucial period for the oratory community Don Bosco is building in Turin, Italy.
But he isn't actually in Turin at this moment.
Right. He is away on a spiritual retreat at St. Ignatius's shrine. And from this isolation, he mails what the sources describe as a fatherly letter back to his community.
But it's definitely not just a quick check-in.
No, not at all. He uses this letter to reveal that he has witnessed a disciplinary escapade back home through what he terms his own telegraph.
And given the year is 1862, he is certainly not talking about copper wires and Morse code.
Yeah, he is claiming a direct supernatural vision. He gets highly specific, which is the wildest part.
The names, right?
Yes. He calls out 3 artisans by name in this letter: David, Tinelli, and Panico. He claims he literally saw them sneak out of the oratory the previous day, July 20th.
And their grand
skipping church services to go swimming in a nearby canal. Okay, let's unpack this, because for a modern listener, this mechanism sounds entirely bizarre. Don Bosco was essentially using divine intervention like a 19th century Find My Friends app.
That is actually a great comparison.
Right. It operates like a spiritual baby monitor to just keep his flock in check while he's out of town.
What's fascinating here is the underlying logic of why he shared this, rather than just keeping the vision to himself. Because the historical sources make it clear that he didn't write this letter just to retroactively punish 3 kids for taking a swim.
So what was the point of calling them out so publicly?
Well, he used this specific, highly detailed incident to establish a psychological and spiritual boundary. He was demonstrating to his pupils that he could observe their conduct from afar. As the text explicitly states, this was for the benefit of their souls.
Wow, I'm just trying to put myself in the shoes of David, Tinelli, or Panico. You think you pulled off the perfect heist, right? Sneaking out, hitting the canal, totally getting away with it.
And then the mail arrives.
Yeah. A letter arrives from a shrine miles away calling you out by name. The sheer terror of realizing your boss has divine surveillance on you, it's an incredible flex of authority.
It really creates an absolute culture of omnipresence. If we look at the 1862 spiritual setting, this behavior aligns perfectly with the broader 19th century religious practice of absolute spiritual oversight.
Meaning he wasn't just like a principal at a boarding school.
Exactly. In this framework, the leader wasn't just a teacher or a headmaster. They were the ultimate shepherd of your eternal soul. Their jurisdiction didn't end when you left the classroom. And notice the mechanics of where she is when he writes this letter.
St. Ignatius's shrine. Why does the location matter so much here?
Because in 19th century Catholicism, retreats and shrines were profound sources of institutional and spiritual authority.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, retreat meant intense fasting, silence, and prayer. So by stepping away into deep contemplation, he actually heightened his mystique. His physical absence didn't create a power vacuum in Turin. It amplified his authority because he was supposedly dialing into a higher frequency.
Like, my physical absence does not mean a lapse in my oversight. But, managing the behavior and the eternal souls of an entire growing community with that level of intensity that has to take a massive toll, you just cannot separate that kind of psychological burden from the physical reality of the human body carrying it.
Which is exactly why the timeline of his physical health is so revealing. The human body is, the ultimate bottleneck for any visionary.
Definitely. And to see that bottleneck in action, we actually have to jump slightly back in the timeline to July 1860, so 2 years before the canal incident.
Right. An incredibly stressful time for him.
Yeah, the historical notes highlight this specific period as being of great importance for the newly forming Salesian Society. They're basically trying to get this organization off the ground.
It's the classic startup phase. The stakes are incredibly high, the resources are thin, and the stress on the founder is just absolute.
And during this highly stressful launch phase, Don Bosco's body essentially rebels. He is suffering from a massive, painful boil on his neck. Yeah, we aren't talking about a mild inconvenience either. The sources describe it as a deeply grounded, agonizing physical ailment that is debilitating him right when his organization needs him the most.
So what does he do?
Well, Father Felix Campo comes to him and suggests that he should ask Our Lady for a cure. Don Bosco eventually agrees to this, and the sources note that he subsequently recovers. Isn't it interesting how physical breakdown coincides exactly with periods of great importance for the organization?
Oh, absolutely. We are seeing a worldview where there is absolutely no hard line between the mundane and the divine. Think about the mechanics of what is actually happening. You have extreme administrative stress manifesting as a very grounded, undeniable physical infection.
Right.
But the remedy he ultimately relies on, at the suggestion of his colleague, isn't medical, it is entirely spiritual.
That's what trips me up. He doesn't go to a doctor in this account. He leans right back into the same supernatural framework he uses to govern his students.
Because in his workflow, the administration of the society, the medical reality of a bodily infection, and divine intervention, they are all inextricably linked.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Medicine back then wasn't exactly what it is today.
Right. Medical science in 1860 was often hit or miss, but for a man building a religious order, faith was the absolute reliable mechanism. He couldn't separate his physical health from his spiritual mission.
But supernatural telegraphs and divine healing, they only get you so far.
Yeah.
You can't build a massive, enduring global organization on visions and prayers alone. Eventually, you need brick and mortar.
You need physical infrastructure.
Exactly. Which brings us to the next major pivot in his life. Let's fast forward the timeline to July 21st, 1869. The Salesian Society is growing fast, and Don Bosco's ambitions are moving beyond Turin. He is setting his sights on Rome.
And Rome is the absolute center of the religious world.
Totally.
If you want your society to have lasting influence, papal approval, and, global legitimacy, you have to establish a physical foothold in Rome. Without Roman real estate, you just remain a localized regional club.
So he writes a crucial letter to his cardinal protector, Cardinal Nina. And the subject of this letter is a major property acquisition. Don Bosco wants to purchase the Church of St. Caius and the adjacent Barberini convent.
That's a huge move.
Yeah. His stated goal is to establish a house of studies for Salesian clerics right there in the city.
We need to pause and look at the mechanisms of power he's engaging here, though. Writing to a cardinal protector is a highly specific administrative move.
Basically like having a man on the inside.
Exactly. A cardinal protector functioned essentially as a high-level Vatican lobbyist or sponsor for a religious order. Buying property in 19th century Rome, especially church property, required navigating incredible bureaucratic red tape. You needed someone on the inside to grease the wheels.
And the sellers themselves are really complicated too. The property is owned by the Barberini nuns, and the sources describe them as being deeply reluctant to sell. Plus, there are other bidders circling the property. Here's where it gets really interesting, because the mechanics of his strategy become brilliant here.
How?
Don Bosco points out in his letter that despite the nuns' reluctance, they actually prefer him over the other bidders, specifically because of the religious purpose he intends for the property. He is operating like a tremendously shrewd real estate developer.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, this is where you see the true genius of his administrative style. He is actively leveraging his spiritual mission as a tangible competitive advantage in a bidding war.
Like using his holiness as leverage.
Right. In mid-19th century Italy, secularization laws were a massive threat to religious orders. Nuns were terrified of selling their sacred spaces to secular developers who might just bulldoze a convent for commercial use.
So he uses that fear to freeze out the competition. He's basically saying, you could sell to those commercial buyers who will turn your convent into a warehouse, or you can sell to me and we'll keep the land holy.
It is a brilliant, unique selling proposition. He isn't just relying on prayer to magically grant him the building. He is managing vertical and horizontal relationships simultaneously.
What do you mean by that?
Well, he's managing up by utilizing the cardinal protector to handle the Vatican bureaucracy, and he's negotiating laterally with the reluctant nuns by appealing to their moral alignment.
It just shows that to be a successful 19th century religious leader, you had to be just as ruthless in negotiations as you were devoted to theology.
Yeah, it's quite the contrast.
The same guy who claimed a supernatural vision of teenagers splashing in a canal is now deep in the weeds of Roman real estate law.
It is a profound evolution, but that evolution carries an inevitable cost. Whenever an institution expands its real estate, whenever it increases its influence and puts down physical roots in a place like Rome, it inevitably steps on the toes of the existing power structures.
Scaling an organization generates friction. Growth brings lawsuits. Expanding your footprint means you're going to bump into someone else's territory, which perfectly sets the stage for the final July 21st letter in our source stack.
Right, the 1882 letter.
Exactly. The year is now 1882. We are 20 years removed from the confident, authoritative man who used a spiritual telegraph to catch those artisans swimming. The tone now is entirely different. We are looking at a letter sent to Don Bosco, written by Father Francis Dalmazzo, who was serving as Don Bosco's procurator in Rome.
And a procurator is essentially his legal and administrative representative in the city. Think of Dalmazzo as Don Bosco's specialized legal proxy and fixer.
Right. The subject of this letter from his fixer is a formalized accomodamento, a settlement. And this isn't a minor disagreement over property lines.
No, this is massive.
Yeah, this is a huge settlement mandated from the absolute top. Pope Leo XIII himself has stepped in to force an end to a long-standing bitter conflict between Don Bosco and Archbishop Gastaldi.
To understand the stakes here, you really have to understand who Archbishop Gastaldi was. He was the local Archbishop of Turin.
Okay, so Don Bosco's home turf.
Exactly. Don Bosco's organization was based in Turin, but it was growing massive and securing direct papal approval, which essentially allowed Bosco to bypass the local archbishop's authority.
It's a classic institutional turf war. The local boss feels undermined by a wildly successful subsidiary that is reporting directly to the CEO.
Precisely. Gastaldi wanted control over this massive movement operating in his backyard. The conflict became so bitter in public that the Pope had to intervene to stop the scandal, forcing a mandatory settlement.
And Father Dalmazzo's letter reports on the feedback regarding the settlement from a very highly placed Vatican official, Monsignor Verga. Verga is the secretary of the Congregation of the Council.
Which, for context, functions somewhat like the Supreme Court of the Vatican for disciplinary and administrative matters concerning the clergy. Monsignor Verga is a heavyweight legal mind.
And this heavyweight legal mind does not mince words. He reviews the terms of this papal-mandated settlement and heavily criticizes them. The sources state he explicitly calls the terms a blatant injustice to Don Bosco.
Wow, so they really stacked the deck against him.
Completely. The terms were skewed to favor the Archbishop. But despite acknowledging this profound, blatant injustice, Monsignor Verga expresses deep admiration for Don Bosco's reaction. He admires Don Bosco's patience and self-abasement in accepting these terrible terms simply for the sake of achieving peace.
The fact that the Vatican's own legal expert recognizes the unfairness, it highlights just how massive a pill Don Bosco had to swallow.
So what does this all mean? I'm really struggling to reconcile this. You're telling me that a guy who claimed God was literally snitching on swimming teenagers. A guy who demanded absolute submission and surveillance over his followers is now perfectly fine accepting a totally secular, unfair legal defeat.
It does seem like a contradiction.
Right. How does he justify rolling over like that? Are we supposed to believe he just suddenly lost his spine?
This raises an important question, but it's not a loss of spine. It is a shift in institutional scale. Think about the evolution of leadership and the mechanics of survival. Look at the difference in his position.
From 1862 to 1882.
Yeah. In 1862, Don Bosco was establishing authority within his own localized community. He was the founder of a startup. He needed to be the absolute, unquestioned spiritual father. The supernatural visions served that specific purpose. It solidified his internal control and protected the boundaries of the oratory.
He had to rule with an iron fist because the organization was fragile.
Exactly. But by 1882, the Salesian Society is a completely different beast. They own prime property in Rome. They are a complex institution operating on a global stage. He is no longer a startup founder.
He's the CEO.
Yes, he is the CEO of a sprawling multinational organization that answers to a board of directors, in this case, the Vatican hierarchy. The rules of engagement have fundamentally changed.
I guess when you are fighting a turf war with an archbishop and the pope has to intervene, you can't just claim you had a vision that you should win.
Right. You are in the realm of high-stakes institutional politics. Don Bosco recognizes a crucial administrative reality. Fighting this blatant injustice might win him a temporary moral victory against Archbishop Castaldi, but rejecting a settlement mandated by the Pope would alienate the Vatican entirely.
It would burn all his bridges.
It would politically destroy the Salesian Society.
So his self-abasement isn't weakness. It's an incredibly calculated, albeit painful strategy. He has to intentionally lose the battle to save the war.
It is the ultimate executive maturity. He is transitioning from a mystical father figure who demands absolute obedience to an institutional diplomat who knows exactly when to heed a monumental loss for the health of the enterprise. Protecting his life's work required him to abandon the high ground and submit to the bureaucracy.
Which leaves us with this incredible documented whiplash when we review Don Bosco's life across these specific July dates.
It's quite a journey.
Just think about the sheer contradictory range of human experience we've covered today for you listening. You have a man who spots kids swimming in a canal via supernatural visions from miles away to enforce discipline. A man who relies entirely on divine intervention to cure a debilitating neck boil because the stress of his startup is breaking his body.
Then the real estate deals.
Right. Then he pivots to hustling reluctant nuns and using cardinal lobbyists to secure Roman real estate, literally weaponizing his holiness to win a bidding war. And finally, 20 years later, he quietly swallows bitter, deeply unfair legal terms mandated by the Pope to protect the very empire he spent his life building.
It leaves you with something entirely unexpected to mull over. We constantly assume that modern corporate bureaucracy, with its board interventions, hostile takeovers, and, strategic legal settlements, is a recent invention of Wall Street.
Yeah, that's the standard narrative.
But looking at the administrative life of Don Bosco, you really have to wonder if the blueprints for the modern, cutthroat multinational corporation weren't actually drafted centuries ago, just hidden behind the stained glass of 19th century monasteries.
The ultimate merger of the mystical and the mundane. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.